Yesterday, Donald Trump was indicted for a third time in 4 months. Yesterday, he was indicted by special counsel Jack Smith for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Um, Lots to talk about here. I have my copy of the indictment. It's been highlighted, it's been tabbed, there are notes. Before we get into that, some introductory notes. We are living through history right now. It's really bad, terrible, crappy history, but we're living through history. Never before in the almost 250-year long history of this country has any sitting president sought to overturn the results of a free and fair election and remain in office even though he lost. That has never happened before 2020. Donald Trump is the first to do that, the first to attempt to do that. And it's also important to note that with this third indictment, this one covers his conduct while he was in office. Alvin Bragg's DA, or Alvin Bragg, the DA in Manhattan, his indictment for the Stormy Daniels hush money payments, that's conduct that took place before Donald Trump was in office. The indictment for the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case out of Miami is conduct that took place after he was in office, after he left office. And so now we've got before, during, and after, all covered by different indictments. Cool. And so let's talk about trial calendars for a minute. He's got 3 civil trials on calendar right now, between the end of this year and the first part of next year. He's got 2 criminal trials on calendar. The January 6th efforts to overturn the election case is going to be set for trial, so that'll make 3. So he'll have 3 civil, 3 criminal. And he's got 3 more indictments that are coming. Fani Willis out of Georgia, which will mark the 4th jurisdiction that he's been indicted in: Miami, D.C., Manhattan, Georgia. Then I believe there's going to be an indictment coming out of New Jersey, which will be jurisdiction number 5, for dissemination of classified materials. There were the 2 incidents in the first indictment from Jack Smith where Trump was showing classified materials to, after he had left office, to people who did not have security clearances. There is no way that Jack Smith is not going to indict on that. And I guarantee you he's got more instances of that behavior as well. The last one, which ties in directly to the efforts to overturn the 2020 election, it's always about the grift. Starting immediately after Election Day, Trump set up an election defense fund. And I think within a month he had raised $100 million. By Inauguration Day, it had raised $250 million in small donor donations from people all across the country who are now complaining about gas prices and the cost of groceries, but they're still giving 50 or $100 a month to a billionaire. Yeah. All of that fundraising was deceptive, which is fraud, which is deception, which is wire fraud, which is going to be another conspiracy case. And every single fundraising email that they sent out is going to be a separate count under that indictment. So we're not done with indictments by a long shot. We got 3 more coming up. I think they're all going to be done and in within the next couple of months. Okay. So, as it relates to the indictment itself, it's 4 counts. Count 1 is conspiracy to defraud the United States. That carries 5 years. Count 2 is conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. That carries 20 years. Count 3, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. That's 20 years. Count 4, conspiracy against rights. And we'll talk about that one a little bit. That's a Civil War era, post-Civil War era law. That carries 10 years. The indictment is only against Donald Trump. Within the indictment, there were 6 co-conspirators listed. Those co-conspirators are 1 through 6, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, an attorney who spearheaded the theories that Pence could throw out electoral votes. He did all the work on that. Sidney Powell, another attorney, just all around whack job. She's the Release the Kraken. Attorney Jeffrey Clark, he was an attorney at the DOJ. He ran their environmental law department, and he was willing to play ball. We'll talk about him too. He was willing to play ball with Trump to coerce the state legislatures to overturn their election results. Then there was an attorney, number 5, named Kenneth Chisbro. So 1 through 5 are all lawyers. Little Kenny Chisbro was the one who spearheaded the fraudulent fake electors plot. And we'll talk about him too. Number 6, it's being reported. Number 6 is a campaign advisor, senior campaign advisor. And I've seen it reported in a couple of places today that number 6 is a guy named Boris Epstein, which I love because Boris Epstein is a jerk of the highest order. But he, along with Peter Navarro, who was one of Trump's economic advisors, those were the 2 guys who were famous for going on Ari Melber's show while all of this stuff was going on MSNBC and just confessing to everything. You know, you had Peter Navarro talking about the Green Bay sweep. He was always doing this with his hands. Boris Epstein went on Ari Melber's show and talked about the alternate electors, and that, you know, Ari Melber said the same thing to both of them at various points in time. He said, "You realize you're describing a coup," and they're like, "Oh no, we're not." Yeah, they were actually. So some things to think about with the document itself. First of all, it's 45 pages long. If you want to pull out your copy and read along, you can do that. The writing in this document, there is not an ounce of fat on the writing in this document. Every word is necessary. Every sentence is structured very well and very tightly. Who is not in this document? Who is not a co-conspirator? Who is not described as having any criminal liability for now? Donald Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. And again, referencing Ari Melber did a great job. He put out this chart that it was a timeline with arrows going across. And it was a timeline of the 8 different conspiracies to overturn the election results that were being run out of the Oval Office by Donald Trump and Mark Meadows and these unindicted co-conspirators. This indictment covers 5 of them. And I'll talk about that in a second. There were 3 that are not covered in this document. That's Giuliani's lawsuits, Trump and Meadows' efforts to get members of Congress to vote to overturn the electoral results. And I guarantee you Jack Smith's not done with that. And then there was kind of a combined, very short-lived discussion about using the military to seize voting machines and having Trump implement martial law. The document itself, there are 4 counts, so there are 4 sections to this document. All of the facts upon which the 4 counts rest are contained within the section for count 1. Meaning so that counts 2, 3, and 4 are each 1 page, and they start off with, this count incorporates all the facts that came from count 1. And so they only recite the facts 1 time, but it applies to all 4 counts. And the first count is the conspiracy to defraud the United States. And they break it down into sections, and the sections that they break it down into cover those 5 conspiracies that I was talking about. It starts off with, you know, manner and means. How did they go about doing this? What manner and means did they use? Well, it starts off by describing the 6 co-conspirators. But then you get to page 6, and it says the defendant's knowledge of the falsity of his election fraud claims. So Jack Smith starts off talking about the First Amendment, which we've all been hearing about today from the right, and especially from Rudy Giuliani. You cannot violate his First Amendment rights. This indictment has as much to do with the First Amendment as the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case has to do with the Presidential Records Act, which is to say absolutely nothing. It's a red herring. But then he jumps right into saying, here's the evidence that Trump knew what he was saying was false, and that he kept saying it anyway, and that he knew he lost the election, which is also going to serve as the basis for an indictment for his fundraising activities. It's coming down later on. But so what are the 5 sections? They're basically found under this header of criminal agreement. The criminal agreement between Trump and these unindicted co-conspirators to engage in these 5 different paths of criminal activity to overturn the 2020 election results. And they start off with, a plan of deceit to pressure individual states to overturn their election results. And we'll go through each state they did that in. This is while Giuliani's 60+ lawsuits are going on. Then we jump into, in mid-December, the fake electors, the fraudulent electors, and you see how that starts off as a very reasonable contingency plan in one state and just explodes over the course of like 3 weeks into this just blatant, flagrantly criminal conspiracy. Then it shifts to Trump's attempt to bring in co-conspirator number 4, I believe, Jeffrey Clark, to take over the Department of Justice. That section is mind-blowing. Then we come back to John Eastman and Trump, who combined are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Vice President Mike Pence to either reject electoral ballots from certain states or say they're contested and send them back to the states, or say these are disputed in these states and hand it over to Congress. And then the final step was doing everything they could to exploit the violence at the Capitol on January 6th itself. Let's talk about Trump's 2 main defenses right now. His representatives are all out there, and members of Congress and the Senate are out there, and everybody on Fox News is out there saying this was Trump's First Amendment rights. He had a First Amendment right to say exactly what he wanted to about the election. Well, yeah, he absolutely did.